On November 23, 2006, at 15:46, a call was received by the Memphis Rescue Service in Tennessee. It is known that misfortune does not take weekends, so it cannot be said that the situation on the 911 line was relaxed. However, the dispatcher who received the call was in shock, as he later admitted to a colleague. What surprised the operator was the absolute calm of the caller, who seemed to be ordering breakfast rather than asking for help. The man introduced himself as Jeffrey Scott and said that his wife had been unconscious since 11 a.m. A voice in the background corrected him, saying that the woman was probably already dead. When the dispatcher asked for clarification, Jeffrey replied that she was breathing a second ago, but his voice was flat and emotionless. Information about a possible crime was immediately relayed to the leadership of the rescue service, and a specialized team was dispatched to the scene. Law enforcement officers arrived at the address a few minutes later, where they were met by the homeowner, who led them to the bedroom where his wife, Ashley Scott, was lying. Upon entering the room, they saw a man bending over her, performing resuscitation efforts. He introduced himself as Dr. Robert McGee, a friend of Jeffrey. He claimed that the woman was still alive but on the verge of death, with barely noticeable signs of life and extremely low blood pressure. The doctors examined her and concurred with his assessment. They suspected she had suffered a head injury from blunt force trauma and was close to death. Her pupils were dilated and did not respond to light, and she was bleeding from her mouth and nose. Additionally, Ashley's body displayed signs of violence. Her legs, chest, and back were covered with multiple bruises and abrasions. The medical team attempted emergency resuscitation. They intubated her, used a defibrillator, and administered drugs to stimulate her heart, but nothing worked. The young woman was dying in front of the doctors. Ultimately, she was rushed to the hospital, where a neurosurgeon assessed her condition. His diagnosis was grim and confirmed the opinions of his colleagues. The 28-year-old woman was in the final stages of brain death. Nothing could be done to save her. Her body systems and vital organs were shutting down. As a result, it was decided not to prolong her suffering and to disconnect her from life support. She died shortly thereafter. There was no doubt that Ashley had been brutally murdered. Her right ear was green, which is typical for individuals who regularly receive blows in the same area, such as boxers. In addition, a mark from a man's shoe was visible on her back, as if someone had stepped on her. If she had not jumped, her fragile body would have been covered with bruises at various stages of healing, indicating a history of periodic violence. While the doctors fought for the life of the young woman, the police interviewed McGee and Jeffrey Scott. The doctor explained that he was the one who insisted on calling emergency services after Jeffrey contacted him at 14:30. The two men had met while studying in college and kept in touch occasionally by phone. Jeffrey said that he had been drinking with Ashley the day before, and after that she felt unwell and went to bed but didn't wake up again. It was then that he decided to seek professional help. The doctor was busy but put aside his work and went to the couple's house, where he found Jeffrey next to his wife, who no longer showed signs of life. Dr. McGee suspected that the couple had quarreled and that something had gone wrong, possibly an accident they wanted to keep quiet. He was aware that Ashley had been drinking heavily and that Jeffrey often lost his temper, sometimes raising his hand to her. After examining Ashley, the doctor realized that the situation was much worse than he initially thought. The woman urgently needed medical attention. He insisted that Jeffrey call 911. When the police asked him what happened, he claimed that the night before they had quarreled over discovering Ashley's message with another man. He was convinced she was cheating on him. Unable to bear the betrayal, he said he hit her once, after which she staggered and fell, as she was very drunk. Jeffrey also noted that his wife often abused alcohol and behaved inappropriately. He no longer wanted to tolerate her outbursts and kicked her out of the house. She typically spent the night in the garage, but in the morning he found her there still sleeping. Out of pity, he brought her back into the house and put her to bed. Time passed, but she didn't wake up. Realizing something was wrong, He attempted to revive her himself before calling his doctor friend. However, the police did not believe his story. Upon arrival, they found Ashley's body covered in bruises from head to toe. No head injury could account for the severity of her injuries. It was clear she had been beaten. Jeffrey was arrested and initially charged with felony assault. As soon as the autopsy results came back, the charge was reclassified to first-degree murder. The pathologist's report was grim. Ashley Scott's death was caused by a subdural hematoma on the right side of her brain. Such injuries occur from a strong blow to the head, leading to massive hemorrhaging and cutting off the oxygen supply to the brain, ultimately causing the failure of all body systems. This was a painful process, and tragically she could have been saved if help had been provided within the first few hours. In addition to the subdural hematoma, more than 6 bruises of varying colors and densities were found on Ashley's body, confirming that she had suffered greatly. The most horrific aspect was that the person responsible for her suffering was the one who was supposed to protect her. After Jeffrey's arrest, detectives began to examine the crime scene, where signs of a struggle were evident throughout the house. Things were scattered, furniture was overturned, and a broken vase lay on the living room floor. On the kitchen table next to the laptop were printed messages between Ashley and her lover, confirming suspicions of infidelity. A more detailed inspection of the garage revealed bloodstains on the floor of Mrs. Scott's car, as well as women's clothing and other personal belongings. There was also a purse containing her documents and passport, suggesting that the deceased had planned to escape but didn't have time. Officers decided to talk to relatives and friends, uncovering unexpected details that shed light on Ashley's life. Unfortunately, it is common for women to fall in love with the wrong men, thinking everything is rosy and promising at first, only to find themselves in a nightmare. As they lose touch with reality, victims often justify their tormentors' actions. In such cases, outside help is necessary, as the victim may not be able to escape on their own. Ashley Scott, born Ashley Pittman on November 4, 1978, in Bossier City, Louisiana, faced a difficult childhood when her parents separated. After the divorce, Ashley's mother Donna remarried. Ashley chose to stay with her father, Jimmy Pittman, who adopted her and loved her dearly. Unfortunately, Jimmy and Donna's marriage did not last, leading to their divorce a few years later. Despite her parents' separation, Ashley had a good childhood and was considered a kind and obedient girl, admired for her beauty and potential. In 1996, she graduated from high school and enrolled at Baptist University in Arkansas, where she met her first love, Jeffrey Scott. They began dating, and Ashley's friends envied her for what they believed was a reliable partner. In June 2001, Ashley married Jeffrey, but their life together was not as she had envisioned. The dark side of her husband soon became evident. Though she had noticed it for a while, she preferred to ignore it. During their engagement, she distanced herself from her family and friends, choosing not to invite them to the wedding, which raised concerns. After moving to Cordova, Jeffrey began working as a computer systems technician, while Ashley became an English teacher. Although she was loved by her students and colleagues, her personal life was a struggle. Over time, the relationship deteriorated, and Ashley isolated herself from her family and friends, increasingly feeling trapped in her marriage. In September 2006, Ashley planned to attend a graduation party at her school, a desire that her husband vehemently opposed. Nevertheless, she went. Afterward, Lori, a close friend, tried to reach out but found it challenging to maintain contact, as Ashley often seemed withdrawn and unwilling to discuss her marriage. Ashley hinted that she was considering divorce but was afraid of her husband's unpredictable reactions. As the detectives gathered information, they found that Jeffrey had repeatedly called Lori, complaining about Ashley and making accusations about her behavior. However, Lori didn't believe his claims and grew increasingly concerned for Ashley's safety. The last time Lori saw Ashley was shortly before the tragedy, when they went shopping. Ashley, however, wouldn't buy anything for herself, and their conversation about her marriage ended abruptly. Ultimately, Ashley became a victim of domestic violence, a tragic situation that could have been avoided with timely intervention. It turned out that the friendship between the two women was restarted 6 months before the crime. Blair felt sympathy for Ashley and sometimes supported her. She also admitted that her affair with Jeffrey was a mistake. Apologizing together, Ashley often hid at Blair's place to escape from her husband. One day, Jeffrey found her and came for her. At that moment, Blair witnessed a brutal attack. Scott hit his wife in the face several times and threw her out onto the street, not at all embarrassed by the presence of witnesses. Even after that, Ashley justified him and tried to assuage her husband's guilt. During the next interrogation, Jeffrey admitted that he turned to Robert McGee only 15 hours after the quarrel, during which time his wife lay unconscious in the garage. Jeffrey continued to insist that he hit her only once due to the discovered betrayal, after which he sent her to the garage where she lay on the floor covered with a blanket. The bleeding wife spent her last hours in cold and pain, while her husband rested calmly in the house. However, the autopsy results did not confirm his words. It was obvious that he had always treated his wife poorly. In addition, the detectives learned that Jeffrey sometimes used the services of escorts even when Ashley was at the alumni meeting. Despite this, Ashley decided to stay in the relationship. Shortly before the incident, she had met a young man named Michael Lowe. From October 29th to November 22, 2006, they exchanged messages, and it was he who encouraged her to leave her husband. Michael expressed his love for Ashley and wanted to show her what another life could be like. When Jeffrey read their correspondence, he became furious and decided to teach his unfaithful wife a lesson. The trial of Jeffrey Scott began on January 13, 2009. The prosecution insisted that this was a premeditated crime. It was clear that the quarrel between the spouses began in the living room, where a broken vase was found. They then moved around the house, and Ashley was subjected to violence in almost every room. Traces of blood were found throughout the house. The divorce lawyer with whom Ashley consulted testified for the prosecution. He said that he met with Ashley the day before her death, and at that time, all the documents for the divorce were already ready. She only had to pack her things and leave the house while her husband was at work. The lawyer advised her to leave secretly, which explains the belongings and documents found in her car. However, Ashley did not follow this advice. She did not want to leave without talking to her husband, which turned out to be a fatal mistake. The lawyer tried very hard to help Ashley, even offering his services for a nominal fee. He also mentioned that he knew that his client had started drinking and had left her favorite job. Ashley did this to drown out her feelings about the marriage and needed support for a long time. They communicated in secret to ensure safety, as her husband controlled all calls. They met in neutral territory. Many witnesses confirmed that they saw scratches and bruises on Ashley, which she carefully hid under layers of makeup. Some knew the true cause of these injuries but felt powerless to help. Forensic medical experts noted that Ashley was often kicked. It seemed that Jeffrey then trampled on her back and legs. Old bruises left by shoes were found. The defense of the accused tried with all their might to reduce the sentence, attempting to transfer the crime to a less severe charge. The lawyer portrayed Ashley in a negative light, depicting her as an alcoholic and hysterical. They did everything possible to make the jury believe that Scott also suffered in this marriage. The defense tried to discredit Ashley, claiming that in 2005 she had been fined for drunk driving. Over time, Jeffrey claimed that he wanted to save the marriage, bought a new house, and was even ready to have children for the sake of a woman who, according to him, had a lover and exchanged explicit photographs with him. As for the crime itself, Jeffrey stated that he lost control after realizing that his attempts to win back his wife were useless and that another man was involved. During the trial, it was noted that after his arrest, Scott did not ask about the condition of his wife, but instead was interested in the results of his case. His lawyer played dirty by stating that most of Ashley's injuries were sustained during seizures caused by withdrawal symptoms. An independent expert was called to refute these statements. He read out the results of the autopsy, listing all the injuries on Ashley's body, and most importantly, named the cause of death, which could not be the result of accidental falls. The prosecution argued that the defense's version of the unintentional crime was absurd. It was clear that the victim wanted to escape from her tormentor, but despite her attachment to her husband, she hoped to end their relationship peacefully. However, the accused confronted her with printouts of her messages with Michael and attacked her. He beat her, fully aware of the pain and suffering he was causing, and then finished her off in the garage where she lost consciousness. Scott saw the severity of her injuries but ignored this and did not call a doctor. He deliberately chose to wait. An unexpected fact was revealed. Investigators discovered that Ashley was trying to save the marriage. It was established that she took special drugs to get pregnant and supported the purchase of a new house. Perhaps she was so dependent on the toxic relationship that she could not imagine life without Jeffrey. However, in the end she decided to leave, hoping to hear from her husband that he would change and that everything would get better. Victims of violence often cling to such illusory hopes. On January 19, 2009, Jeffrey Scott was found guilty of a second-degree crime. Even the judge was dissatisfied with the jury's decision, as one juror did not believe that the defendant was guilty enough. State law requires a unanimous decision for a conviction on a first-degree crime. The victim's family was also left disappointed. The defendant would spend only 2 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Perhaps this punishment was not severe enough for a man who had tormented a woman for years, a tyrant who isolated her from everyone, brainwashed her, and made her think that she and her family were not worthy of being a part of his life. Ashley Scott's story left a deep imprint on the hearts of her loved ones and those who recognized that her tormentor did not receive justice. They began to actively fight for changes in state laws, calling for tougher penalties for domestic violence and in particular for premeditated crimes against those in vulnerable positions. Ashley's father, overcoming his grief, decided to establish a charitable foundation in her memory. The foundation began to provide financial assistance to women in similar situations. The fund soon began to support hundreds of women across the country, helping them gain strength and escape destructive relationships they had previously been unable to leave due to fear and addiction. Thanks to this fund, seminars, rehabilitation programs, and temporary shelters for victims of domestic violence were organized. The fund gained wide fame, and due to the active work of Ashley's family, state laws were changed. New legislation stipulated that victims of domestic violence should have the right to safely exit relationships, and perpetrators would face more severe punishments. Thus, the memory of Ashley did not fade away. It became a symbol of hope and support for those in trouble. Even though her life ended tragically, her story inspired thousands of people to fight for justice and the protection of their rights. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments and don't forget to like this video. Thanks for watching.